Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and once again I'm joined by Lawrence Connolly. Lawrence, welcome back to State of Mind Studios. How are you?
I'm well. It's great to be here.
Well, it's always a pleasure. Obviously, you joined me for the game over the weekend, and you're back in for your normal tour of duty on a Tuesday. Plenty to talk about. We've got the European game coming up on Thursday, obviously. There's talk around Kris Ajer and AC Milan. Maldini says that he is certainly a target for AC Milan. Fraser Forster, the grass is not always greener, and Scott McKenna, have we dodged a bullet? So there's plenty to talk about, and everybody who's tuning in on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter is welcome to get involved, and that's what it's all about. It's all about engagement. Now, interestingly enough, some people are telling us to continue with regards to the chat about Tommy Roderick and Chris Lee Griffiths, to stop talking about them. I got an interesting comment the other night. Stop banging on about them, you're living in the past. Well, these guys are first team players, current first team players, and both are in the squad for Thursday night. What do you make of that, Lawrence?
It's great to see them back. You know, that they're undoubtedly talented football players that know how to win things, know how to play in big games, score goals, both game changers. You know, when you're struggling, those are guys that can really change a game, whether it's coming off the bench or just a bit of magic from them. So it's good to see guys getting back to fitness. You know, the more fit players we've got, the better.
Now, you used a term there, game changers, and I think when you're up against, for example, earlier this season, the only game in which we've dropped points against Kilmarnock, you're looking for a game changer, weren't you? And we're crying out. Now, I understand that players who aren't playing all of a sudden become the greatest players in the world, because you know, people think, oh, had he been introduced or had he been playing, things would have been different. But I do honestly believe that at 27 and 30, these two guys can still make a difference. On YouTube, I've been told to stop speaking about them. They're in the squad on Thursday, so I'm going to speak about them. That's not to say, I know that Roderick was on the bench at the weekend. Do you think Griffiths is anywhere near the bench for Thursday night?
Griff's got it hard, isn't he? You know, the three guys in front of him are doing the business. I think if he's in the squad, he's got to be near getting on the bench, hasn't he? We've got to get him some minutes in his legs at some point. But Eddie's a bit tired, yet he's getting up to fitness. So are we maybe going to rest Eddie again? You know, if he's tired, give him another wee rest, and you've got Ajeti, Klamala and Griffiths, your three forwards. It's not a bad option to have those three.
Well, I was looking at the possible lineup for Thursday night, and looking also at Kevin Graham's lineup for the match, and Kevin would have gone with four defenders. I'm hoping that Julian's back fit and we can go with Ajer and Duffy as a three centre half match up, Barkas and goals, and I would also look at playing two up front.
Yeah,
but I don't think Lenny will be playing two up front, and obviously the two I would pick would be Edouard and Ajeti. I'd love to see that partnership develop in Lawrence. I think what we have there is a potential to have a dynamite partnership up front. They'll complement each other. You've got the holding up play of Edouard. It looks as though Ajeti is one of these guys that if nothing's happening, he'll work 20 yards back to get the ball.
Definitely. I think you might go with Christie and Ajeti again. I think you're right. I think we're going to give Edouard the rest again. You know, if he's tired, we've got a lot of games coming up, and we want Eddie at his peak. Don't we?
I just look at
games.
I look at this game as, at the moment, it's so important. We can't take anything for granted. I know that the Latvian league might not be up to much, and some would say the Scottish league's not up to much. But I think in terms of standards, we're higher than the Latvian league. We've got to gauge it on that. Riga, they'll offer their own challenges. It's away from home. The game's going to be broadcast live on Premier. It's another kind of one-off PPV event, which we will have in the studio so that we can discuss the game. I think it's more of a risk. I actually think at home against Livingston, you can rest Edouard. And apparently he asked to be rested. And it's a game at home against Livingston, you can rest your best player. Away from home, it's a must-win tie. It's a one-off. I reckon he's got to start.
It's definitely must-win, but it depends how Eddie's feeling. I suppose if he's feeling that bad, he had to ask to get rested. Is he going to be feeling 100% for it? The good thing is we now have options. We've got Ajer and Klamala scoring goals and playing well, so it's not like, I suppose, the earlier games you're going, if we didn't have Edward, well, we hadn't signed a Yeti, what's Klamala like? We didn't know much about him. Griff wasn't fit. At least we've got options now, haven't we? We're getting to a better place.
We do have options, and it's a dilemma that the manager likes, I'm sure. Tommy Rogic obviously was on the bench at the weekend, which kept a lot of people happy. Hopefully we'll see that again. How do you see the team lining up then?
I'll go 3 at the back. Mm-hmm. Barker's and goals, same 3s at the back. And I think Jamesy Forrest on the right, Taylor on the left, Brown, McGregor, Charm, and I think he's going to go Christie and Yeti. I think he will rest Eddie. And
keep Christie in the team. I mean, Christie's goal scoring return is excellent. It has been over the last couple of seasons. He's energetic. He loses the ball, but he's always willing to win it back. There was a suggestion that he was playing for himself. A lot of people were saying that. Didn't really see that against Livy, though.
What a ball that was, eh? Touch. He didn't look to get shot off. It was just touch, slid it to a Yeti. And that's a finish, isn't it? That's a player that's high in confidence. And according to Yeti, he's not yet 100% fit.
No.
Just wait till he's got that extra half yard that further fitness is going to bring. That extra sharpness.
Now, I won't see you before the game on Thursday, so I'm going to ask you for your prediction early doors here. So how do you see it going on Thursday night?
I think Lenny's starting to get the team knit together. We're more of a threat now at corners than we've been in a long while. Mm-hmm. We used to go, no, another corner because we're not going to score. What's the point? But now you've got a good chance we're getting something in target here. So I'm going to go 3-0. I think we're going to be going there. The players are going to want to make amends for Fer and Faris. I know Lenny take a bit stick. Probably should have had a striker, but he's also right in that there was enough chances there that we've got the players with a talent that should be putting them away. Striker or no striker. And when you look at the goals we lost, what was it Ahmed doing? You're like, just clear it out for a throw-in, back to the keeper, out for a corner. Mm-hmm. Just don't let the ball run and the guy take a shot. It was just an aberration, wasn't it? From what we've seen from Al-Hamid, he's never had that kind of mistake in his game.
No, he's always been really, really cool. And what frustrates me about the Ferencváros that's in the past now, we're now talking about Europa League qualification for the group stages, is you become so frustrated looking back on the exit when, and I'm going to make a prediction here because I think it will happen, when Yeti and Edouard develop that partnership at some stage this season and we're blowing teams out the water, Lawrence, and you think, had that been in place when we played the Hungarians, when Duffy is bossing the defence as he almost already is, and you're thinking, having that player in there in that position, that's when it becomes frustrating, doesn't it? Because Celtic, maybe a slow start, best start in the 10 seasons, as we were talking about yesterday, 19 points after 7 games. But once we're right into the season and we're flying, that's when you start looking back and think, had we had the personnel in the door and they were fit and they were playing like this against Ferencváros, we'd have blown them away.
I think it seems to be a perennial problem with our transfer strategy, getting players in too late. And I know we brought a couple in January, Sorrell and Klamala, but they're really viewed as more development than our marquee signings, if you like, or immediately improving the first team like a Yeti and Duffy have. So it's definitely something Celtic need to be judging the risk. If we sign these big players and spend a bit extra money closing the deals earlier, we're improving our chances of getting that Champions League.
It's a tough one because you look at the January transfer window as being the one that you want to get the players in, then who are all bedded in by the time we play Champions League football, the qualifiers, etc. But it's a more difficult transfer window because obviously we're in the midst of a season, and I think that is the dilemma. You know, you would end up having to pay a lot more for the players, and that's what Celtic don't seem too keen on doing.
Yeah, I mean, if we're after players, they're good players, so they're generally doing well for their team. Their team may be challenging for trophies, so they're not going to want to lose. They're good players in January. But I think it goes even beyond January. Even at summer, we seem to be haggling down to the last minute. I mean, Ajeti seemed to take forever to go over the line.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it was the same with Duffy. How much did we save ourselves by
haggling?
What was the cost risk with missing out in Champions League? What, 30 million?
I know.
So did we save ourselves $1 million but below the chance of 30?
The thing is, going back to the interview that we discussed in depth yesterday, Dermot Desmond's interview that he gave to The Athletic, and we were talking about, well, he was talking about the Champions League exits, and there's this whole thing whereby we were better but we got knocked out and we were unlucky and this and that. But if that happens on a regular basis, which it now has started to be the case, then you've got to question the policy. Do we have a big enough and a good enough squad to win domestically? 100%. But if you want to be ready for that Champions League, and it's difficult, we know that to get the players in January and bed them into the squad, and it's going to cost more. But as you say, you're going to have a much better chance of progressing into the promised land and the riches of the Champions League.
It's all right, kind of saying we're better than Fair and Forest. Well, actually, no, they beat us.
Well, I know.
It just comes down to, if somebody knocks us out, that's the decider who was better, isn't it?
Of course.
You can go, well, we're unlucky, we had chances, and El Hammond made a mistake. Whatever it is, we need to improve something. We can't keep going through that cycle, I suppose. If you're going to cut margins so fine because you're not haggling in money or whatever the reason is why our players aren't fit enough for the early qualifiers, we need to think, well, how can we put ourselves in a better position? It
seems season on season we're scraping by on, when we do get through. And that was also the case under Brendan Rodgers as well. I mean, the AEK Athens was a frustrating exit as well, wasn't it? Because you were looking at things like the fact that one of our most influential defenders wasn't available for selection. Had he been in there, and you see what Celtic went on to do that season against what Athens did, and you say, oh, we're a better side, but they beat us.
Aye, that's what it comes down to, isn't it? It's sometimes you're better being a lucky team, but you've got to make it look. I mean, you've got to go, well, how do we get our side to the best position? How do we get our best players on the park? How do we close deals quicker? Because it's obviously Lenny's identified some good targets in Duffy and Ajeti. He's got a good track record of developing players and buying well, I think, in both spells as manager.
Aye.
So
somebody will give us a list of Banguros in a minute, but I think what you're saying there, I do agree with that. He's got a talent for identifying players and putting teams together like he did first time round, and he's starting to do now. When you look at the fact that we brought in 5 first team players this pre-season, it's starting to look like a Neil Lennon side.
Aye. And it's just frustrating that it wasn't kind of 3 weeks ahead, and we maybe need to identify and go, well, are we haggling too much? I think me as a sport, I'm going, it's great that we're getting the best deals, but sometimes, geez, just get a guy in the door.
I know, and as supporters, we don't concern ourselves too much with the balance sheet. I mean, it's not as if we're we're putting out side contracts for deals that we can't afford or anything, Lawrence. We know that Celtic are a cash-rich side. We also know that during the pandemic, people are hedging their bets a lot of the time. But the actual payoff is qualification and...
It's a huge cash pot.
Exactly. And it's the only cash pot that a Scottish football club has, really, because everything else is limited. It's incredible that Celtic do what they do in terms of merchandise and season ticket sales. Absolutely astronomical figures when you look at where we are and where we're playing. So the only thing that we can do, the only market we can tap into is the Champions League riches.
And I think since 2012 we all became a bit more aware of balance sheets and...
Yeah. Acronyms as well.
Yeah, and financial terms and...
CVAs and EBTs. You could write a whole article just on acronyms.
Certainly, I know the difference between liquidation and administration of half of Scotland doesn't. I certainly know.
I know. Yeah.
It's
quite easy to understand, actually, isn't it?
I would think so.
It certainly is. Now, a big part of the Celtic State of Mind Bulletin, and as everybody knows, we go out five times a week. We go out every weekday. We then cover all the games. So we normally do 3 broadcasts for every game. So we're doing about 6 live broadcasts for the match days. A big part of all of these broadcasts is engaging with Celtic fans who are tuning in on the social media channels via YouTube, Twitter and Facebook, Lauren. So let's have a wee look to see who is saying what and what your opinions are, particularly on Kris Ajer, because we're going to go on to speak about Kristoffer Ajer in just a few moments. Chaz Buchan, welcome to the show, Chaz. You're commenting via YouTube to say, give me a shout, Lenny, and I will drive him to Milan myself for £14 million. Stephen Forbes, if Colley is a realistic target as a possible replacement for Ajer, Sampdoria, 8 million they were talking for him.
Yep.
The club could look to bring in Ben Davies ahead of his potential pre-contract in January. This transfer may be more likely than Colley. It probably wouldn't be as much as Colley in terms of a transfer fee as well. Follower Celtic, good to hear from you again via Twitter. I take 20 million and a sell-on clause for Ajer, but who could we bring in as a replacement, or do we stick? And Gary Doonan on Facebook, will new measures being brought in effectively end supporters getting into grounds for the rest of the season? A different point, but a very important one from Gary. We were talking about this yesterday, Lawrence. I don't think Scottish football grounds will see a supporter in them before the end of the season.
Don't think so either. Rugby grounds might, but I don't think football grounds will.
They're held to a completely different standard for some strange reason. But I just, these are the things we're talking about, in dispatches during the week. Everybody knows how shambolically the coronavirus pandemic has been dealt with in this country. And when you get, we had a guest on the other week, Edgar Summertime Jones, a musician from Liverpool, talking about, Boris. When you've got someone like that, I would not trust him to put my bins out on a Thursday. And he's running the country, and he's running the country into the ground in many different ways. But we are at the mercy of people who, for want of a better word, are just absolute shambolic at what they do.
Yeah, I mean, they let the St. Ledger go ahead, didn't they? So horse racing is okay. Grouse shooting's okay. But not football. You're just kind of looking and going, you really don't have a clue what you're doing. You have no clear strategy. You're going, is another lockdown the answer? The data shows that Sweden didn't have a lockdown. They done better than us. You really kind of got to look and go, there's enough data now that maybe shows that lockdowns aren't the answer.
And this is a wider, using Boris as an example, is obviously on a wider scale rather than just the football events, Lawrence. But obviously, when you use that as a microcosm of the whole issue, there's no way when you look at the situation as we currently stand, there's no way Scottish football fans will be back in grounds this season.
No,
it's not going to happen.
Just not. I don't think until Boris campaigns all the time, doesn't he? So until the people, or he reckons whatever polls he's carrying out, enough of the people want it, then he'll do it. I don't think he does anything based on for the good of the country, does he?
We should have a political podcast at some stage. We'll get a few of our.
What would we be on?
What do you think? We'll get a few of our politicised associates in. We'll have a politics. If anybody wants to get involved in that, let us know, because I'd quite happily do a politics podcast at this moment in time. Going back to some of the points on Kris Ajer, the big question is, and people scoff at the figures that have been mentioned, 14 million and higher for Ajer, but you look at the player that he is developing into.
Yep.
He's 22.
22, 7 years. First team football. He started at 15 in Norway, a couple of seasons there. So we sign him out on loan at Kelly. He's done really well.
Change of position, big influence on him was Ronnie Dyler. No one can deny that. He was one of Ronnie's prodigies, and I think for me, Ronnie Dyler's a talent spotter.
I actually thought he was a decent manager as well. It's just unfortunate that some of the senior pros at Celtic seem
That's a big part of it, wasn't it?
Turn against him, yeah, and didn't really let the club down by not following what the manager's saying. It's manager.
Celtic fans, I don't hear anybody having a bad word to say about Ronnie Dyler. Celtic fans would welcome him back, for the 10 in a row party, as he's a promise to come in when I spoke to him on the podcast, remember. And I just think we look back fondly on Ronnie, but he has left a legacy.
Definitely, yeah. Good track record developing players. And people say that, Brendan brought in this professionalism. Well, Ronnie had brought it in before him, hadn't he?
He certainly tried to implement something different.
Yeah.
I used to like listening to Ronnie, and people say how well he could talk a good game. But he did have this philosophy, didn't he? And he had this outlook on Celtic players being 24-hour athletes. And a big part of that and a big part of his approach, it seemed to, go against the grain of some of the senior pros, one of whom is very vocal in the press against Celtic time and time again, in Chris Commons.
Yep.
Which disappoints me, because when I think back to the relationship I felt that he and his family had with Celtic, when it's the cheap digs that he has at Celtic time and time again, it frustrates me a wee bit, because I would much prefer to remember pre-Mulder Commons.
Definitely. He must look back on that and think, surely he's looking back like, I should never have done that. He must look at himself as a professional footballer and God, I was so far out of line.
Oh, I know.
I think he does that, wouldn't you?
I would hope so. I mean, but again, what happens when these ex-players are moving into the Scottish media? There have been a few that have spoken about, not towing the party line, and the work offers dries up, because they're all freelancers.
Yep.
I think most people realise that. Even the likes of Chris Sutton, he's a freelancer, so he can work for anyone he wants. It just so happens that certain broadcasters offer him a lot of work. And I think he does it well, because Chris Sutton has been critical of Celtic. He's been critical of individuals at Celtic. Ronnie Dyler, for example.
Yep.
And Craig Gordon.
Yep.
He was very critical of Craig Gordon. And so I think Chris Sutton is far more balanced than a lot of the pundits out there, but he's fair.
He builds his points well as well. He puts some kind of constructive argument behind it, doesn't it? Doesn't just go, that's garbage. Which
I've seen him in action.
Isn't it?
I've seen him in action, and I'm going to share this on the podcast, because I'm not sure if I have shared this before. And I do like him. I do actually like him on a personal level. But I had this image of Chris Sutton as a pundit that I had created in my mind from watching him on the TV. I thought he was quite aloof, and he was just maybe sometimes flying by the seat of his pants. And then I seen him in action, because I was working behind the scenes one night at New Douglas Park for a live event. It was BT Sport.
Right.
And Chris Sutton was one of the pundits. And I remember I was there very, very early, and the first pundit to turn up was Chris Sutton at 4:45 in the afternoon. Now the game kicks off at 7:45.
Yeah.
He turns up, speaks to everybody, goes to the areas where there's bars for food and stuff like that. And then he retires into one of the buses, which is one of the production buses. And he sits down and he brings his folder out, and he's studying notes on every player that's playing that night. They're doing a pre-match with the guy, what's his name, Cragen.
Yep. Stephen Cragen, yep.
And so they're talking about other teams and other results that week. And he's doing all his research on all the other teams. He's asking for easy for me to say, pronunciations of specific players to make sure he gets it right. He was an absolute pro. He was buried in piles of newspapers and notes. And then when he goes on screen, he becomes this different person. But the absolute epitome of professionalism prior to that. And I don't know, it's not the impression I got. I'm not saying I thought he was a slacker, but when I seen him in action, I thought, wow, that guy's good. Brilliant.
Was the same on the training field? Was he a good trainer at Celtic? Maybe he's just had that discipline all the way through and knows that, if you don't put in the effort beforehand, you're just not going to get the rewards.
Mm-hmm.
And he obviously wants to be the best. And he was some competitor when he came to Celtic, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He brought us up a level then, didn't he?
But I mean, he certainly did. And there was a completely different approach when the type of player that O'Neill brought in started coming in. I always liked the idea that maybe for a few seasons we were bullied. Celtic were being bullied, and O'Neill brought in the personnel to ensure that didn't happen. You look at the stature of the players.
Balherin, Baldy, Sutton.
It's as relevant now, again, going back to the Dermot Desmond, it's as relevant now to talk about that side as it ever has been. The actual physicality of that side was unbelievable. And more so than anything else, and I know that we had some fantastic players, but that team physically would just batter the current team.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. There's not a doubt, is it? Probably Bobo.
No disrespect, by the way. I'm talking Celtic v Celtic here. I'm not disrespecting Celtic.
I think Bobo could battle him by himself. Because he used to have discussions with him in the changing room if anything's
that's right.
to be believed in it. Petrov and lockers.
That's right, aye. And Tomo was involved, but he was hiding in a locker. No, but I love that about Sutton. But he approached his punditry with that level of professionalism. I think what I'm getting at, Lawrence, is I don't think a lot of the people who are on there just talking, just saying stuff, have done the research. And that's why Sutton can often pick arguments with someone, because he can pick holes in their argument.
Well, he knows his stuff, and you get a feeling some people have just got a job because
they've just turned up. I know.
Just turned up. Somebody's mate. I'll get to see what I like here.
And they waffle their way through the broadcast, whereas Sutton, he's got all these facts, all these figures, and he knows if he's crafted a view on something, he can back it up because it's not somebody else's view.
He definitely builds his arguments well. Even when he criticises Celtic, I think that's what I was saying earlier. Like, you've got other ex-players just come out and it just slags Celtic. You go, well, you're not really building your argument in anything or being constructive with it. Whereas Kris will build it well and he's constructive as well with it. So I think maybe that's why people like him a bit better. He's a bit more logical. You can see what he's saying. It's just not an opportunity to slag, as he's actually bringing it a fairly balanced point that you can say, well, I don't agree with you, but I can see how you've drawn that from the information you've got.
A couple of other points coming through. Chess and Sports Fan on YouTube. No, he won't stay. This is about Ajer. Eddie going to go too. So Chess and Sports Fans looking into the future here. Hence, is this our best window has been ridiculous. I think you're referring to a previous podcast we did when all the players we were talking about had actually been signed. So you're basically speculating that we're going to get rid of Ajer and Edouard. And, to be honest with you, I've already said if we do sell one of the first team players, because before that there's been speculation about Lawrence's Edouard, Ajer, Encham and Christie.
Yep.
The position I feel that we are best covered in would be the midfield position. I don't think it would be a good idea for Ajer or Edouard to be allowed to leave at this stage.
Don't think so, but a lot of power lies with the players. I think Eddie seems fairly happy. I know he has to be rested, which was unusual, and there's been a bit of a speculation off the back of it, but he generally seems really happy at Celtic. I think out the two would be more likely to lose Ajer, which is maybe why we're looking at more centre-halves just now. Mm-hmm. Midfield, we're well covered, aren't we? And I suppose Celtic's looking good. If Christie leaves for nothing, if he won't sign that new contract, maybe now is the time to get maximum value, because we do have other players that can fit in. We've brought Turnbull in. There are midfielders struggling for game time. So it wouldn't be ideal, but if Ajer forces a move, Norwegian internationalist, it's 22 still developing. I think 20 million with a big selling clause is more than fair.
It goes back to Gary Doonan's point earlier, talking about football fans getting back into stadiums. Lawrence, Celtic are obviously losing out on match day revenue in a big way. We know that the season tickets have been purchased. There's been a huge interest in the new Adidas merch and everything else. But on a day-to-day basis, on match day, 50-odd thousand Celtic fans going through the doors. There's an average revenue per customer, as they call it, or per unit, as often we're referred to. The ARPU, that's disappeared. You're not getting that. You're not getting people going into the shop, the footfall, the refreshments, all this kind of thing is out the window for every home game. So there might be a wee hole to fill, and that is obviously the concern when you're talking about Ajer, or you're talking about, I'm not even going to mention Eddie leaving, because I don't believe he's going to leave. I don't
think Eddie will go. Between now and Christmas, we're cash rich with season book money. You've touched on, we've got the Adidas money as well. It's the money after Christmas where it's going to bite for every club. And I think Celtic have probably done their sums well. We're kind of okay to January, but that's when it's really going to start biting on us if there's no revenue and no fans. Mm-hmm. If it's biting Celtic in Scotland, it's really going to hurt the other clubs.
100%. I've discussed it a wee bit in the early days of the kind of lockdown, you know, talking about how it's going to affect other clubs. And there was the argument about how some of the more provincial clubs could virtually close down and open back up for business because their overheads were so low. But there's a great amount of clubs there who, without that revenue, I mean, if Celtic are okay until January, which is the figure that we believe to be accurate, there's going to be a lot of other clubs that, won't see this out. They won't get through it.
No. I mean, it's lost revenue, they'll never recover. Mm-hmm. The debt's building up. You've got Hearts in there, dropped the division. They'd have been looking for big crowds because that seems to be the benefit. If you drop down, you get lots more through the gates if you're up at the top one in the league. Because last time Hearts dropped the division, they won that league, didn't they?
Yeah. It's
so they've got to be struggling. Same way Aberdeen, Hibs, Safeco, they'll all be struggling. If Celtic have made a plan and went, right, although we are prudent as a football club, if it's hitting us in January, it's definitely hitting them. And how they get through to the end of the season, are they going to start selling season books in February, some of them?
It's pretty grim. It's a grim outlook, Lawrence. So another wee thing that I do enjoy when someone like Paolo Maldini confirms the interest in Ajer is it's genuine. Whereas there's other clubs and other players where there's so much interest in certain players that's absolute fictitious nonsense that's made up by a press who are deliberately trying to put somebody in the shop window.
It's kind of Sesame Street stuff, isn't it? What's the letter of the day? So it's more or less Sesame Street. What's the club of the day? Who's interested? You're like, right, if we had any club for Spain this week? No, right, somebody in Spain wants to, but that's the kind of level it's at, isn't it?
It is.
They must have a random generator on the computer. Hit a country, gives a club, and gives a figure.
I know.
It's just...
But I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at the stature of club who are interested in Ajer. And I know that there are many out there who don't rate him as highly as I do. But I do accept that there's areas of his game that he needs to improve on, Lawrence. But as I said yesterday, I also believe that when Van Dijk left us, he wasn't the finished article, but he needed that move to develop. And I think Ajer, selfishly, I would like to keep him. Could I see him moving? It wouldn't surprise me.
I think he's a guy who'll move. At one point, whether it's this window, next window, or next summer, I think Ajer is there that he wants to move and develop. If someone like Paolo Maldini, what a defender he was, rates Ajer as a defender, it speaks a lot, doesn't it? That's
a real stamp of approval, eh? The bold Paolo. We'll come back to Paolo because that just sparks memories in me in the 80s and 90s where I was obsessed with football, whereas now I'm just obsessed with Celtic. We spoke about that before. And, that team he played for, there's some incredible stats in relation to the goals that they conceded, him and Baresi, if they played for AC Milan. Unbelievable.
Costa Curta, Baresi. It was hardly conceded any goals one season, was it? Like 8 or 11 or something?
They're going by, Van Basten, Rijkaard, Hula. It was just unbelievable football in football terms. It was incredible. And they had the smartest kits, the Italian teams, back in the 80s. They did
look good.
In the 90s.
I mean, they also let us Sao Paulo from them and give us a wee glimpse of Paolo for a season, which is, I think they only signed him because of the foreigner rule or something, 3 foreigner rule at the time, was it?
AC Milan, when they signed him, yeah. I always remember when we did sign Paolo, and there was a wee bit of footage of him playing for AC Milan, and you're thinking, we're signing this boy. And then he done that press conference, and bizarrely, someone organised to have a big massive pizza. Remember that? And he's standing there with his tongue out with this pizza because he's Italian. Obviously, we'll get a pizza, right, and make it a 40-inch pizza. It was just in bad taste, wasn't it?
I met him the day before the press conference in the Trongate. Recognised him. That's Paolo Di Canio. Outside the Rangers shop, he was on his way in. I think you won't be doing that. Another week once you've done your press conference and been unveiled.
I've just finished series 4 of Peaky Blinders, which is obviously the mafia series, Lawrence. So I'm loving this chat about the old Italian vibe, with Maldini. Not so much Di Canio because obviously his politics, going back to the political podcast. We might discuss that later on.
Well, we could get Enrico on for that.
Enrico, as long as he brings his translator.
Well, that's his door. I met him in the penalty spot down in Saw Street, Tate's place. Just walk in, there's Enrico and Oni.
Yep, I've had the pleasure. Now, Owen McGrandles, YouTube snap their hands off for 14 million and sign the young fella from Hibs?
Porteous. He's definitely developing into a player, isn't he?
He is, eh?
He can pick a pass, but some managers seem to be upset with me. Imagine, Porteous must be going, that's 2 for the price of 1. Not only did I get a captain, I've got a manager too. Surely you think, right, he's just found my captain up to nothing. Did you get involved in game 2 for the price of 1?
I know. And just laugh at him. Brilliant.
Right, it's
superb. Gary Doonan on Facebook, and Paolo Maldini will know a player, especially defenders. He will develop him into a £50 million defender. We said yesterday, I don't think that's a ridiculous statement, by the way. I mean, if he goes to a club like AC Milan and he works under the tutelage of some of the people there, we're looking at a boy who, the sky's the limit.
Look at Maldini's dad, Cesare, right? Wonderful defender. So, Maldini, 18? Never out the first team at AC Milan from 18 onwards. He is someone that knows
He just got better.
Everything, doesn't he? Oh,
even in his mid-30s.
Apart from when he came to Celtic Park, and he couldn't believe Aidan McGeady tore him to pieces.
Aye, we Aidan. The prodigy, child prodigy. What was he, 18 at the time?
I think it was 18, and Maldini was after the game. Who was that guy?
That's the one game, though, if you think of McGeady, that's the one game you go back to, isn't it? AC Milan, Celtic Park.
I don't think he ever hit those heights again.
No.
Well, I mean, it's Paolo Maldini, and if he's going, who was that guy I was playing against? It says a lot, doesn't it?
Oh, a great night at Celtic Park. Richard Murray, I think your avatar is Cathkin Park in Glasgow. Cracking wee shot there on the terraces. You're commenting on YouTube, he's not committed to the cause, so he must go, particularly with that money on the table. Joe Porter, Ajer won't make or break 10 in a row. £14 million is good for him. And Silky Skills 85 don't want players that are not committed. What do you make of that then? Because is he uncommitted? I don't know if that's an issue at the moment. He's playing. He's a first pick for Lenny.
So I think it's maybe two different things in that I think he's committed when he's on the park, but I think he's definitely
looking for a move.
So there's some players that don't give you that commitment on the park when they look for a move. I don't think Ajer's one of them. I think he gives everything on the park.
The most obvious one, remember Pierre?
Oh, it just that wage is only fit for the homeless or something.
I know.
That was at the time.
Still leaves a bad taste in the mouth. All that,
Really, Pierre. It's like
even his free kicks for Feyenoord against Rangers didn't make up for that.
A wee bit of the way.
A wee bit. Colin Watt, YouTube. Colin will be in tomorrow, and we will be talking to Colin tomorrow on the Celtic State of Mind Bulletin. Colin states, can't really let him go without having a replacement ready, especially playing 3 at the back. We'll be back in the situation we were in before Duffy signed. Colley won't sign. Davis looks most likely. I agree with you, and that's why I think, out of all the positions that we're talking about speculation, the midfield is the one where you could almost afford to lose somebody. Yep. We can't really afford to lose a centre-half at this stage.
I'd love to keep Ajer, but sometimes the power's not with the club. If he says, well, I'm not signing another contract, and I think 14 million's cheap, I think we should be looking upwards of 20 with a big, decent sell-on on it. We've got to look at everything holistically, haven't we? It is cash, we don't have the Champions League. If he doesn't sign, will we get as much for him again? We've got a couple of backup centre-halves, Beaton, El Hamid. We've obviously, that seems to be the area that the rumours are coming out of, that we're still interested in bringing another in. So unfortunately, it looks like that's the one that's most likely to leave. It's the one we can most afford to leave. It certainly looks like the one that's most likely.
Right. It'll be disappointing. One of the players who continually is linked to Celtic is Scott McKenna, but we've been hearing, Lawrence, that deal certainly will not be done, and he'll be going for a cut price to Nottingham Forest.
3 million. What did Brendan offer? 8?
I was astonished that I never ever thought he was an £8 million player.
What did Brendan play for? Jack Hendry?
Jack and Bauer, as we call him.
Yeah, was maybe Brendan not a good... Didn't have the same kind of eye for talent that Lenny has?
Well, the two that he brought in at centre-half, Compere and Jack Hendry, were never the level that we needed. Never the level, nowhere near the level that we required.
Compere had a decent Bundesliga career behind him. What happened? Who knows? It's all rumour, isn't it? But he certainly never had any career at Celtic. Jack Hendry was just absolutely stunning that we were even interested in him. never mind for what we paid for him. It was just, really? We want to bring him back to Celtic? Because it was a Celtic...
Before he went to Wigan, yeah. See, the thing with that, Lawrence, I'm not against picking up young Scottish players from the Scottish leagues. You can see how players can develop in Scotland, Ryan Christie being a prime example. So, to pick him up, performing well for Dundee. Famously, the scouting reports were Beckenbauer-esque, and it just didn't work out for the boy. But what I didn't like to see was the kind of backlash of that, because I think there was a few occasions where he's maybe bitten back online, isn't he, on Twitter and things like that. So these things do get to some players, and I do wish Jack all the best. I know that things are better for him. He's had a terrible injury, isn't he? And I hope the guy does well, and I hope he progresses, but I don't think it'll be at Celtic Park. But, Brendan Rodgers, you could do a whole podcast on bad signings of Brendan Rodgers' time at Celtic. I don't think he was a great spotter of talent. I think he was a great developer of players. And a lot of the players that he brought in were flops. They didn't play a lot of games. I mean, we spent a lot of money on players like Gamboa and Kouassi, Compere, Hendry, the list goes on. And, if you were to look at the successes over the duds or the flops, and I don't like calling anybody a flop, but they certainly didn't do it for Celtic. There's plenty. There's plenty in his CV.
I'd definitely say Lenny's got the better track record. You're right. Other teams seem to have that route to develop players in Scotland. Porteous at Hibs, Gallagher at Motherwell. And I think it's probably because they can just bleed them in the team earlier. There's less at risk for them. Celtic lost another player to Man United, didn't we? Man City. We're starting to lose our talent because we don't have the route to first team football for
There's no bridge between the youth or the development stages and the first team. We've spoken about it so often on this podcast. We've had coaches coming in from all over Scotland talking about it. Ex-pros talking about how the reserve league was that bridge.
Yep.
That's never coming back in Scotland.
Never coming back. Doesn't look like the other clubs will vote for the Colts.
Which is disappointing.
Yep. So we need to find some other solution, and hopefully Celtic are working on it, whether it's loaning them out. I think for 17, can we get them on a contract where we've got years options and then just loan them out? Because they really need to be playing football, don't they? They need that competitive.
Oh, they definitely do, Lawrence. Yeah. And, it was a couple of weeks ago, or last week rather, James McDonough, who was in from Edinburgh City, confirming that, they could take 4 boys from a single club at any one time on loan, and they can get a maximum of 6 loanees in. So Celtic could have a number of partnerships or relationships with clubs where we're putting 4 boys out who are, sometimes there's a deal in relation to paying the wages if they play.
Yep.
And if they don't play, Danny Lennon was saying if they don't play, then Clyde have to pay the loanees' wages. So it works in your favour. It certainly does work in your favour and gets the boys game time.
Well, they're talented boys. If they're at Celtic, they're at Celtic for a reason. But we need to up their development, don't we? We need to have something that's going to keep them interested in staying in the Celtic long term. Was it Hepburn scored 5 for Bayern? Or whoever Bayern have got him at on night. De Bella looks as if he's, young Karamoko looks as if he's on his way, doesn't he?
He's checked out, isn't he?
Yep.
Yeah,
it's something we need to resolve, and there'll be people at Celtic working on it. Maybe COVID's going to bring it closer to us because other teams will be really scraping for cash. Maybe it brings that loan option or makes it more attractive to them.
Absolutely. We did speak to Graham Diamond about it as well, Clyde's sporting director, talking about in terms of development, it's great for the players, but then there's a whole tranche of players who don't have that opportunity because, let's say, Celtic loan out a dozen players.
Yep.
And they go out to the respective clubs, 3 clubs taking 4. The 4 players they would have taken get pushed further down the pecking order, further down the leagues.
There's only so many, there's only 11 players can play in any one game. You're kind of looking, going, there's only so many spots up for grabs. I think that's what it comes down to. The amount of boys that play under 16, under 17, that number, how many make it as pros? It vastly drops every year. And it's just the reality of football. There is only so many positions. But what we want to do is get kind of, I suppose selfishly, get more of our guys into our first team.
Richard Murray, again on YouTube. Christie is sadly being targeted by the internet bampots. I thought that was a term of endearment. Internet bampot.
Yeah.
When he's clearly one of our most important players. I'd agree he is one of our most important players.
Yep.
Absolutely agree with that. And I know that, you remember he was sent off against Livy when he beat us 2-0 last season away?
Yeah.
Bad tackle.
I'm not too sure if he'd been playing for Inverness, he'd have been sent off. But yeah, it wasn't the best tackle. But yeah,
he misjudged the Astro. He thought his knee would have gone into the turf. That's why it was so high. But anyway, I do know for a fact that he came off at all social media after that because he was getting too much flack and it was actually affecting him.
Yeah, it's got to be hard, isn't it? You know, you make a mistake in a game and it's some of the abuse he was getting. You're like, really keep things in perspective. You know, we're going through such a period of success that
you've just got to remember, you know, and quite rightly so. I think the awareness of mental health, Lawrence, it's in the public eye. It's in the domain. It's not going to go anywhere now. It's something that we're always going to hear about, which is fantastic. It's not one of these things that people don't talk about. It's not a taboo subject anymore. But the more we talk about it, the more we need to realise that when it comes to things like that, footballers are not immune to criticisms. And, you know, just put yourself in the shoes of you and I talking today. And it's happened. It's happened on the podcast. It's happened to some of our contributors. And they get a hard time. Yep. And it affects them. It's not nice. Am I immune to it? No, but I'm kind of used to it, right? You get used to it. You get a wee bit more thick-skinned about it. And some of the flack you get, if it's on follow, I'll never see it anyway. And it just shows that they're tuning in as well, Lawrence, to be fair.
Well, they need to go somewhere to see some quality, don't they?
Yeah, well, this is true. Stephen Ray, talking about quality. Stephen is normally very good on any comments or discussion points. And he's saying if Milan want Ajer, they can give Celtic £10 million plus Diego. Here we go. You want me to pronounce that? Lazolt, who is a 27-year-old Uruguay international left wing back. For me, that would be a brilliant piece of business. Player plus cash deal.
Left wing back gives Taylor some competition. I think Taylor four league appearances, is it 1 goal, 4 assists? So
a better option than James McLean, it would appear. Going on yesterday's response to the podcast.
James is he in the Johnny Hayes mould? You know, but a slight upgrade. But yeah, definitely Uruguayan international left back playing for AC Milan. You know, on the face of it, you're thinking he's got to be a decent player. I've not watched in the last season.
Well, I do know that Stephen keeps his eye on a lot more kind of global football than certainly I do. So I would take that on board, Lawrence. It does open the door. If AC Milan are interested, Maldini has confirmed the interest, and I'm sure they're interested in a lot of players all over the world. It opens that door. What kind of personnel can we get from them? Potentially.
Yeah, you know, if they're interested in coming, that's a problem position. If it's 10 or 15 plus that player, you've then got to go, well, would Celtic spend the extra and bring in another centre half? Whether it's Coley from Sampdoria for 8, would Celtic be happy with that? Probably pushes a wage bill up a bit. Two of them would be on more wages combined than Ajer, wouldn't they? Yeah,
probably. I would expect that. It comes down to the balance sheet, Lawrence. Again, there's quite a few comments coming through in relation to that. And Richard Murray, YouTube again, welcome back to the show. Richard, good that you're getting involved. This happens almost every summer. The checkbook gets used after we're out of Europe. Shocking.
That's what I'm touching on. Are we haggling down to, if we saved ourselves $1 million, say between Ajeti and Duffy, if we saved $1 million by that haggle, but cost ourselves a shot at 30 million? You know, and it's happening too. Whatever tactics we're using, it's happening too often that the players are coming in too late, and it's only a week or two too late in some occasions. How much would that cost them to get that a wee bit earlier?
The big thing I would say, and I've said this before, and this probably was on the podcast where we were saying, is this Celtic's best transfer window? And bearing in mind the transfer windows have been operational since 2002, because a lot of the examples that were given were pre-2002. But the reason I said that was we're signing players who are first-team players, going by this transfer window, first-team players, Lawrence. No projects. Yes, I know Turnbull's young, but he's in the first-team squad. He's starting to make appearances. And I do think the strategy has changed. I do think the calibre of player that we've brought in this transfer window is higher, let's say, than the January transfer window with regards to Klamala and Sorrow. No disrespect to those two players, but they're a different type of signing. They're a £2 to £3 million project or gamble that you're hoping to develop. I think the players we've been bringing in during this window, they're first team picks, aren't
they? Well, they're definitely in with a chance. You're not going off. He might turn into something. He might get 10, 15 minutes. You're expecting these guys to come in and play.
Mm-hmm. And make a difference. I mean, Ayeti, game changer. Turnbull, we've not seen much of him, but what we have seen has been positive.
Here's the thing in Turnbull. Do you think's in more first team minutes? Cham or Turnbull? Over their career so far.
Over their career?
So far.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was Turnbull, because I know...
I don't know the answer, but I suspect it's going to be Turnbull. And that says a lot about how we struggle to get players' game times, doesn't it? And develop players.
It certainly does.
What a good job Motherwell are doing. There's a couple of players there that's, Campbell, maybe worth looking at. Declan Gallagher, who was at Celtic. Another centre-half that's maybe worth keeping an eye on. What
happens, though, there comes a point, a ceiling point for clubs in Scotland, and I think I mentioned the other day St Johnstone hit that under Tommy Wright. He probably stayed 18 months longer than he should have done. They take it almost to the peak of that club's kind of abilities.
Yep.
And I think Robinson's at that stage with Motherwell, and if they lose a couple of the young talents you're talking about,
that'll be it. Gordon Strachan spoke about it as well. He thought it was a life's span of a Celtic manager, didn't he? Where you can only take it so far.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you think they're not improving, or you need to move on. You need to make that choice.
Is it a 3-year cycle with a manager?
That's what Strachan said. I don't know if it's 3 or if it's going to change on the individual, how much grown he's got in the game as a manager. Some managers maybe be longer than others, but there's definitely a time when managers come to their end. They've done everything they can with a club, or you just don't see any progress. And sometimes maybe it's fans just want a change.
And it's an injection again of a new approach, and hopefully a good approach, when a new manager comes in for the squad as well. Kevin Selt on YouTube, do people forget about Beaton? Ajer can go, we'll get good money to use in a replacement. We've mentioned Beaton a few times. The guy, he is the man who is very dependable for Neil Lennon. Neil Lennon signed him, first time round signed him. Very reliable. He's obviously... you can utilise him in midfield or at centre half. He's very calm. I think he slows things down too much if he's in the midfield for the way Celtic play, Lawrence. But he looks totally composed at centre half.
I think we're just so lucky to have him. He's an internationalist that's happy just to be a guy in the background. He knows he's a squad player. But what a squad player for us to have. Sometimes in midfield, particularly in Europe, sometimes it's what we need. If we've got a small lead, bring Beaton on, but his ball retention's great. He covers the ground. He's very defensively aware. So some games in midfield he's going to be okay. Maybe not when we're chasing a goal. Although he does have a decent long range shot on him. But he does slow it down a bit in midfield. Sometimes that's what you need during the game. At centre half, he knows the position. He can play it. You'd certainly, outside of Celtic, would they start at centre half for every other team in the league? Probably.
Now, there is a point here from Kevin Selt. Why has the Ajer money gone from 29 million to 14, 15 million in the last few weeks? Weren't we talking 20 to 25 to Milan not long ago? Well, it's kind of generated really just by speculation at this stage, isn't it? I mean, when you're being questioned by Hugh Keevins, £20 million for Ajer, and whose money, in what currency? I think my answer was 40 John Spencer's, Shuggy.
Aye.
Right? So when you're looking at a player like Ajer at that age, with the experience that you mentioned, it's difficult, obviously, to value a player. So it comes down to the two clubs. If he was to go to a club at the moment for, let's say, 14, which is the current figure that we've got, the add-ons would push that up, you would think, to 20 plus.
Lenny said 14 won't cut it.
He did say that, didn't he?
Yeah, so I suppose if you're the buying club, you're trying to buy as cheaply as possible, and if you're a selling club, you're trying to sell as highly as possible. But if KT, carrying an injury, went for 25 million, and he was older than Ajer, less international caps, less first team games, I would say, I don't see why Ayer's not going for the same kind of money. It baffled me to say why he's going for less. he's certainly got the potential to grow into an outstanding player.
So is that your starting point then?
For me, it would be, or 20 million with a 25% selling clause. You know, whatever, or 20 million, 10% selling clause and another player coming back. But I would think that's kind of where we've got to be looking to get.
Yep. Especially if, obviously, you're not in a situation with a player whose contract's running down like Ryan Christie. I think Celtic have always performed well in recent times, haven't they, in selling players and getting good value.
Yeah.
People might argue the Van Dijk was a snip, etc., but I think we've learned from that as well.
I think Van Dijk was a snip, but I also think we got what at that time was the ceiling for the Scottish League. I think that's something that we faced as the league's not marketed very well, is looked down upon as a result of that, and it gets us lesser fees than, even if they come from other European leagues, they seem to be willing to pay more money than they pay to Scotland. But I think with Virgil going down there, proving what quality player he is, he helped push the ceiling up for other players. So you've obviously got Musa, you've got Kieran that's went for money. When Eddie goes, he's got to be the first £40 million player plus, I think.
A wee head just popped in behind you there, Lawrence. I don't know if it was the ghost of the studio or what it was, but if anybody noticed that, I've seen it as well. Kevin Graham, maybe it was just me that saw it. Kevin Graham, I said yesterday that one Ajer, Encham or Eddie will go. One from those three will go. I just hope, whoever it is, we have a plan and time to replace. I think that's a big concern at the moment, isn't it?
Well, it seems that we've got an active plan at centre-half, doesn't it? You know, that's where the rumours are coming from, that Celtic are still interested in these centre-halves. There seems to be more noise about that position. Maybe it could be that we're actually just generally looking at another centre-half because we think we're a bit light for the quality that Lenny wants there. Maybe Peter's going to surprise us all and just go out and buy another centre-half and not sell anyone.
A wee interesting point there, because we've obviously spoken about, you know, a lot of people are saying penny pinching, getting players in on time, etc. And we're looking now, the question of John McGinn's come up again. So looking at why we didn't sign McGinn, and Kevin Graham is coming on to say that we matched Villa's bid, we matched Villa's wages. It wasn't penny pinching in that case. Hibs, Villa and McGinn played Celtic like a fiddle.
Maybe they did. I think maybe if Celtic had been in quicker with the bid, we might have got him. I don't know, but if we'd bought McGinn, we wouldn't have had Christie. He'd have went the other way. So, you know, Celtic's financially very well run, and we're just saying, you know, I suppose it's a frustration of supporters when we see things go by or things we maybe could see happen quicker or better. But, you know, we're entitled to our opinions. On the McGinn one, I'm thinking, well, we wouldn't have had Ryan Christie, we'd have sold him. You know, so as much as if it was penny pinching or it wasn't, it would have cost us Ryan Christie as well. Yeah. So, I suppose football management's a hard game, you know, not everybody's good at it. It's certainly, we seem to be doing well managing contracts, selling players, generating a profit from player sales. So, yeah, we touched on it. We want players in quicker, especially for the Champions League. But in the beginning, one alone, yeah, we did come up with maybe a bit later than we should have, with the same money, the same wages. Mm-hmm. And I think McGinn himself said that it was the promise of first team football. Because he's probably looked at Celtic midfield and he's used to playing against them and went, where do I think I'm going to get a game? Is it Celtic or Villa? When you look at Celtic midfielders, what maximum 3 places going to be up for grabs? It's now going to be, and you're going, well, Scott Brown and Cal McGregor's there. So you're playing for that third place against Rogic and Cham, Christie.
The big point you make there, I think, Lawrence, is it was devastating not to sign John McGinn, and the answer is, was it? Because we got Christie. And up until now, he has done so well. So I take that point 100% from you. Stephen, via Twitter, as you're saying about Van Dijk, Celtic have not had a decent defence since then. We do speak sometimes about the central defensive partnership. I actually really liked Van Dijk and Denayer. I don't subscribe to the fact that Denayer was carried by Van Dijk. I mean, he wouldn't make me look like a good centre-half, mate. So
he certainly made him look better.
Well, there's always that partnership, though. Yeah, it works.
Definitely. I mean, I think Van Dijk's going to make anyone look better, isn't he?
Denayer's done okay. He's playing. Okay, you know, he's doing just fine at Lyon. And
I think that's going to be the best player that Dyer ever plays with, without doubt, isn't it? Centre half.
Absolutely. And since, if you look at the partnerships before then, again, no laughing at the back, the best centre half partnership we had in defence was Caldwell and McManus.
Yeah,
different styles, different qualities.
Talks about that some of the stuff he takes as a manager, but
I know.
Like, I got us to two last 16s with McManus and Caldwell as the centre half pair.
He did. He actually did. And the thing is, well, Mowbray comes in, he's got it in his mind, he's not going to play these two guys. At that point, McManus is the captain of Celtic, and Caldwell's Scotland's Player of the Year.
Yeah.
And he dismantles that. And then we go through a plethora of central defenders until we get your Denier and Van Dijk partnership.
They look very assured, don't they? I think they're very tidy, very assured. Both can play a lot of football, can't they? They're footballers. I think we've definitely missed that assurance and tidiness and just utter calm composure that Big Virgil brought. Nothing was a trouble for that guy. He never broke sweat up here, did he? Not even when he's running 40 yards to stick the ball in the net.
You're talking about Van Dijk?
Yeah, he never broke sweat, did he?
Well, I'll not get into that. Listen, it's been absolutely brilliant today because we're getting loads of comments coming in as we normally do on the Bulletin. A Celtic State of Mind's Bulletin will be back with you tomorrow at 12:30 and I'll be joined by Colin Watt. All that's left for me to say today, Lawrence, is thank you very much for joining us again on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thanks. Good to be.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks.